Part 48. I am immortal and I raise a divine beast in another world. Author, Chen Wunian. Chapter 471. When Chen Hao heard this, he immediately understood what Angel Bell meant. Are you talking about the celestial computer? Chen Hao asked. Hearing this, Angel Bell nodded slightly, yes. At present, most of the advanced civilization warriors are more like a handle, operating a huge celestial computer. And that celestial computer is the real source of power for the warriors. Just like my biling. Angel Bell looked at Chen Hao and said, there are two sides in this universe, one is the bright side and the other is the dark side. The bright side is everything that people can see with their naked eyes, but the dark side is all kinds of dark information. Manipulating dark information can change some things on the bright side. And manipulating dark information requires computing power. Whoever has stronger computing power will be more powerful. When Chen Hao heard this, he knew what Angel Bell was talking about. Regarding dark information, Chen Hao also learned some things from the information database of the information processor. This universe is like a world written by extremely advanced computer programming. This world has two sides. One is the matter that can be seen by the naked eye, such as celestial bodies. The other side is a bunch of dark information, and those dark information correspond to those materials and the like. Now Chen Hao finally understood that the function of the biling owned by Angel Bell was to write the dark information of the dark side, so as to change the materials on the bright side. Chen Hao thought of the information processor. Everything that his information processor could do seemed to be based on this principle. In this case, his information processor was actually the same thing as Angel Bell's celestial computer. If there is no computing power, only a simple divine body, it is actually useless. Angel Bell crossed her legs and looked at Chen Hao. The divine body can only withstand a little bit of beating at most. Hearing this, Chen Hao touched his chin and nodded in agreement. In other words, it still depends on technology. But, I have seen the girl named Xiaoying. Angel Bell suddenly spoke. Hearing this, Chen Hao looked at Angel Bell. Angel Bell stared at Chen Hao with her sapphire eyes, with a hint of doubt on her face. Xiaoying's body is already comparable to the third-generation divine body. Chen Hao was stunned, and he frowned. Xiaoying? The third-generation divine body. Angel Bell nodded slightly. Well, Xiaoying's body strength is indeed at the level of the third-generation divine body. Chen Hao covered his face with his hands, frowned, and remembered the scene of Xiaoying being directly blasted to pieces by a laser cannon. Laser cannon. If the strength of the laser cannon is strong enough, it can even destroy a star. And the third-generation divine body, no, let alone the third generation, even the fourth-generation divine body is not as good as a star. So, in fact, Xiaoying's divine body has reached the level of the third-generation divine body through evolution, but, I haven't discovered it yet. Xiaoying's body is a planetary-level body condensed by the energy of the entire yellow wind star. Chen Hao's eyebrows stretched slightly. In an instant, Chen Hao felt a sense of sudden enlightenment. During this time, Chen Hao was attracted by the power of technology and has been exploring the power of technology. But he forgot that the evolutionary ability of his beasts was even more powerful. These evolutionary abilities are all from the civilization of a higher dimension, which gives them the ability. Now Xiaoying has only integrated all the abilities of a gas giant planet, and she already has the strength comparable to the third generation of divine bodies. What if Xiaoying integrates the energy of a brown dwarf? Or, integrates the energy of a star? What level of strength will her divine body have? Thinking of this, Chen Hao suddenly felt that the blood in his body was hot. Looking forward to it? It's really exciting. Chen Hao stood up. Angel Bell also stood up and looked at Chen Hao. What's wrong? Chen Hao looked at Angel Bell and smiled. Help me find the next brown dwarf. When Little Diamond finishes swallowing this brown dwarf, we will set off for the next one. Angel Bell's eyes were shining. She looked at the smile on Chen Hao's face and smiled. Chen Hao walked to the balcony and looked up. He wanted to see the figure of Little Diamond who was swallowing the brown dwarf. But in this God Realm star, what you can see when you look up is the blue sky and white clouds composed of the atmosphere. Looking at the blue sky and white clouds, Chen Hao smiled. Now let Little Diamond evolve and evolve into a star. After Little Diamond evolves into a star, you can use the star-catching ring to capture the brown dwarf, and then convert the brown dwarf into energy for Xiaoying to use, and then see how powerful Xiaoying can become after she obtains the energy of the brown dwarf level. When Little Diamond continues to evolve, Xiaoying can also evolve with it. One celestial body evolves, and one gene evolves. Chen Hao was looking forward to the future, looking forward to how powerful the beasts he cultivated could be. Can they surpass the 7 civilizations mentioned by Angel Ling? Interesting, really interesting. Time passed. 3 days later. In the God Realm star. Chen Hao sat at the dining table in the dining room, eating the food prepared by the Snow Girl while looking at the 3D projection in front of him. A transparent sphere is suspended in front of the dining table. Inside the sphere is a 3-dimensional 3D projection, which is a small diamond figure transformed into a brown dwarf. The brown dwarf has been almost swallowed up by the small diamond, and it is estimated that it will be swallowed up within today. Chen Hao noticed that the brown color exuding from Little Diamond's body slowly changed from the dark brown at the beginning to a somewhat bright brown. The color has become brighter, Chen Hao muttered. Is it because the mass becomes larger and there is more tritium in the body, so the fusion becomes more intense, causing the color to become redder? Chen Hao thought. At this time, the small diamond figure in the projection suddenly disappeared. Chen Hao was startled. Master, suddenly, a voice came from beside him. Chen Hao came back to his senses. He looked to his side and saw a petite figure standing there. It's the Little Diamond. Little Diamond looked at Chen Hao with her diamond-like eyes and said, I have completed the mission. Hearing this, Chen Hao showed a smile. Let's go rest first. After I finish eating, we will go to the next destination. Little Diamond's eyes lit up slightly, and there was a smile on her face. Yes. Soon, Chen Hao finished his meal. During the meal, Angel Bell also came over. Chen Hao and Angel Ling came to the deck of the Bailing. Chen Hao glanced at the Angel Bell of the Bailing that was being operated. He withdrew his gaze and looked around, sizing up the Bailing in front of him. He crossed his hands across his chest and said, I remember your Angel King's name is Bailing, right, Bar? Then the name of your battleship is Bailing? Does it have anything to do with Bailing? I am immortal and I raise a divine beast in another world. Author, Chen Wunian. Chapter 472. Angel Ling answered while operating, Angel King, this is my teacher. This Bailing was given to me by my teacher. Hearing this, Chen Hao couldn't help but look at Angel Ling more. I didn't expect that this guy had such an identity. The blue data of 0 and 1 in Angel Ling's blue eyes disappeared. She retracted her gaze and looked at Chen Hao. She smiled, are you surprised? It may take a long time to talk about me and my teacher. Maybe you can consider opening the quantum barrier. In this way, I can tell you slowly in the warp engine channel. Angel Ling smiled wickedly. Chen Hao crossed his arms and said, forget it, that's too boring. Angel Ling was startled, and her smile was more helpless. Then there is nothing we can do. At this time, Bai Ling started. Chen Hao looked forward and saw that the entrance to the warp channel in front was getting closer and closer. Finally, the entrance swallowed Bai Ling, Chen Hao, and Angel Ling together. Chen Hao only felt a black and bright in front of his eyes. Inside, Chen Hao saw a huge brown dwarf. The brown dwarf was slowly rotating in front. An information panel appeared in front of Chen Hao. Brown dwarf unknown planet. Mass, 31 Jupiter masses. Awake, a voice came from the side. Chen Hao came back to his senses. He looked beside him, and saw Angel Ling standing beside him, looking at him. Chen Hao blinked, he looked at Angel Ling, and then looked at himself. This time, didn't you take me to the bed? Hearing this, Angel Ling smiled. No, because I found that you don't like that very much. If I take you there again, I'm afraid you will be angry. Well, this guy is quite detailed. Indeed, Chen Hao doesn't like to lie on someone else's bed as soon as he wakes up, and it's a girl's bed. This feeling is not very good. Actually, it's good now. Angel Ling crossed her arms, looked at Chen Hao, and said with a smile, I can see you on the deck every day, watching you open your eyes, looking ahead, with a dazed look. It feels very cute. Chen Hao was silenced by this guy again. Chen Hao didn't know what to say to Angel Bell. He couldn't. Chen Hao retracted his gaze. Book. The universal book appeared in front of Chen Hao. Chen Hao took out the God Realm star card from the universal book. Transform. A white light lit up slightly. A figure appeared in front of Chen Hao. It was Diamond. The girl, who was less than 1.4 meters tall, thin, and made of diamonds, stood in front of Chen Hao. Diamond slowly opened her eyes, revealing her diamond-like eyes. After the eyes opened, Chen Hao's figure was naturally reflected. Seeing Chen Hao, Diamond's eyes lit up slightly, and she smiled, Master. Hearing this, Chen Hao smiled, how many days have we not seen each other? Diamond was startled, and she said, half a year. Although it was only a moment for Chen Hao to pass through this warp channel, in fact, half a year had passed in the outside world. This brown dwarf is a bit far from where Chen Hao was before. Chen Hao nodded slightly, do you see that? As he said, he looked in the direction of the brown dwarf, and then looked at Little Diamond. Little Diamond looked in the direction Chen Hao had just looked, and she saw the brown dwarf. At a glance, Little Diamond's eyes lit up slightly, and she looked at Chen Hao, Master, is that my next target? Chen Hao nodded slightly and smiled and said, well, go ahead. Well, Little Diamond disappeared on the spot. Chen Hao looked at the brown dwarf again, and saw that next to the brown dwarf, a brown dwarf with a larger volume suddenly appeared. See this? Chen Hao stretched his eyebrows, he crossed his arms around his chest, and when Little Diamond swallowed the brown dwarf, then Little Diamond would become a red dwarf. Red dwarf. Chen Hao was still quite interested in seeing what it looked like. Chen Hao remembered that the star closest to the Earth was called Proxima Centauri, and that Proxima Centauri was also a red dwarf. When Diamond swallows the brown dwarf, her mass will be enough to ignite the hydrogen in her body for nuclear fusion. Angel Bell's voice came. Chen Hao looked at Angel Bell. Angel Bell looked at Chen Hao and said, by then, Diamond will become a real star. Hearing this, Chen Hao smiled, yeah. Angel Bell smiled playfully, but before that time comes, we will be bored. Do you want to play chess? Chen Hao's smile froze. Chen Hao touched his nose, no. I can give you a few pieces, Angel Bell said with a playful smile, with her arms around her chest. Chen Hao's mouth twitched, go away. Chen Hao was too lazy to pay attention to this guy. He picked up the God Realm star card, transform. The God Realm star card disappeared, and the entire God Realm star card transformed into the appearance of the God Realm star. Chen Hao and Angel Bell returned to the God Realm star. Chen Hao went straight back to the room, and as soon as he returned to the room, he saw the Snow Girl wiping the room with a towel. When the Snow Girl saw Chen Hao coming back, she stopped what she was doing and looked at him, Master. Hearing this, Chen Hao smiled, you are here to clean again today. The Snow Girl nodded slightly, the Snow Girl has nothing to do, so she came to clean. Hearing this, Chen Hao smiled, okay, now that I'm back, I need to use the room, so I won't disturb you for now. The Snow Girl's ice crystal eyes shone with joy, and she nodded slightly, okay. The snow girl turned and left. When she walked to the door, Xuanyu seemed to remember something. Her steps paused slightly, and she turned to look at Chen Hao. Master. Chen Hao looked at Xuanyu's actions, and there was a hint of doubt in his eyes. What's wrong? Snow girl said, Qiao has come back. Qiao? Chen Hao was stunned. Silver fox girl Qiao. The snow girl nodded slightly. Yes, Qiao came back to find her master, and then she found out that her master was traveling in all realms, so she went back. Qiao? Chen Hao touched the back of his head. He left Qiao with the orcs, and it has been countless years since he left him. I almost forgot about her. Unexpectedly, she came to find him on her own. Chen Hao wanted to remember the last time, when Qiao slaughtered the entire lion race in order to protect his own race, and then struggled with pain. Chen Hao frowned. Did something happen to her again? Chen Hao crossed his chest with his hands. Perhaps it's time to go back to VAF planet to take a look again. It just so happens that you can pass the boring time by going back to VAF Star to play. After making up his mind, Chen Hao looked at Xuanyu. Go and do your work first. I will go find Qiao and ask. When the snow girl heard this, she nodded. The snow girl turned and left. Chen Hao turned sideways and looked at Angel Bell beside him. I'm going to VAF Star, you. Angel Ling showed a smile. I plan to stay in the God Realm Star to see how Huofeng and the others are doing with their technological research. Chen Hao was startled. Won't you follow? Angel Ling's smile was particularly elegant. If you want me to follow, I can accept it. The corner of Chen Hao's mouth twitched. Just pretend I didn't ask. He was just surprised that Angel Ling suddenly changed his gender today, so he asked subconsciously. It was impossible for Chen Hao to take the initiative to ask Angel Bell to follow him. Chen Hao's figure disappeared from the spot. He appears in front of a portal. Look at the portal in front of you. Chen Hao stretched his eyebrows. He had almost forgotten the last time he came to this portal that led to the VAF Star. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. I am immortal and I raise a divine beast in another world. Author, Chen Wunian. Chapter 473. Chen Hao stared at the portal in front of him. Chen Hao still remembered that the last time he used this portal was when the god of law passed away. Before, Chen Hao went to VAF Star to relax, but when an acquaintance died, his mood became even worse, so he came back directly. How long has it been? Chen Hao has forgotten to remember the time. I don't know what happened to VAF planet now. Chen Hao didn't think about it anymore and stepped into the portal. His vision went dark for a moment, then brightened up. Chen Hao looked around. The place where Chen Hao was located was a somewhat familiar hall, which was particularly bright. Directly in front of Chen Hao, two girls in white robes stood on either side of the gate. They were looking at Chen Hao with their blue eyes. Eyes facing each other. The two girls' eyes lit up. The two of them knelt down on one knee facing Chen Hao and placed their hands on their hearts. Saint Nora pays homage to the god of creation. Saint Suna pays homage to the god of creation. These two girls are Nora and Suna. It was the two little guys that Chen Hao met before. Chen Hao said, "Get up." Nora and Suna stood up, and they looked at Chen Hao. Chen Hao looked at their appearance, and there was a hint of doubt in his eyes. Why are you two still the same as before? Chen Hao has forgotten how long it has been since he left VAF Star, but what is certain is that it must have been decades. But now, the two girls in front of them are still the same as before. She is slim and petite, with a holy and dignified temperament. She has not grown up at all and still maintains the figure of a girl. Nora explained aloud, Vajra, the god of light, gave us the ability to maintain our appearance. We want to maintain the appearance of the first meeting with the god of creation, so we have not changed our appearance. Hearing this, Chen Hao touched his chin. Badr, that guy, seems to be panicking around during this time. When Nora saw that Chen Hao was silent, she raised her face and looked at Chen Hao. Mr. God of Creation, do you need to do anything when you come to the mortal world this time? If Nora and Suna are useful, please do whatever you want. Noila seemed to want to keep her voice as calm as possible, but Chen Hao still heard a tremor. That was her nerves. Chen Hao showed a smile. I do have something to do, but I can handle it myself, so I don't need you to send a message. Speaking of this, Chen Hao said in his heart, Information processor, search for the location of the silver fox girl Chiao. Instructions received, searching is in progress. Search completed, location locked. Chen Hao said, build a warp engine channel. Instructions received, warp drive channel is being constructed. Build complete. As the mechanical sound of the information processor sounded in Chen Hao's mind, a black warp engine channel entrance opened in front of Chen Hao. Chen Hao looked at the warp engine channel in front of him, and he suddenly realized something. Chen Hao raised his hand and touched his chin. For such a short distance, you can actually just let the information processor transmit it to you. Although it also requires the use of a warp engine, the speed is much faster. Forget it, it doesn't matter. Chen Hao didn't bother to think too much and stepped into the warp engine passage. Go through the warp drive tunnel. Chen Hao appeared in a spacious room. As soon as he arrived in the room, Chen Hao smelled a faint aroma. The aroma is like the floral scent of some kind of flower. There was mist all around. Chen Hao looked at the room. The room is very spacious, and there is a pool surrounded by smooth stones. The water in the pool has a light mist. This is a hot spring pool. In the hot spring, there was a beautiful figure soaking in it, and she was looking over here. Eyes facing each other. Her eyes lit up and she quickly stood up. As soon as she stood up, Chen Hao turned sideways to avoid seeing things he shouldn't have seen. Master, it was Chiao's voice. Chen Hao said, put your clothes on. Yes, Chiao's voice revealed a hint of joy. I really didn't expect to encounter such an embarrassing thing. Perhaps before using movement, you should first ask the information processor what the target is doing, and then consider whether to move. Master Chiao's voice came, I'm dressed. Hearing the sound, Chen Hao came back to his senses and looked at the source of the sound. Upon entering his eyes, Chen Hao was slightly startled. I saw Chiao standing there slim and graceful in a loose white shirt. The modern attire of a shirt, coupled with Chiao's tall and proud body, looks particularly beautiful. Coupled with Chiao's pair of fluffy white fox ears and the white fox tail behind her, it looks even more exotic. Chen Hao was thinking that if Chiao were placed in his own time, he would probably become popular. When Chiao saw Chen Hao, her little face was full of smiles. Master, I haven't seen you for a long time. Hearing this, Chen Hao nodded slightly. I heard from Snow Girl that you came to the God Realm Star to find me a while ago. Ye Chiao nodded, and she said, 10 years ago, Gao Lin established the Beast Alliance. As the leader of the alliance, Gao Lin borrowed the system of the Yinglong Empire, managed the Beast Alliance, and let the alliance communicate and exchange with the Yinglong Empire. Now the Beast has also ushered in peaceful development. Chiao smiled. During this period, the Beast has also introduced a lot of ideas and technological power from the Yinglong Empire. Now the Beast emphasizes equality for all. Now even if the silver fox does not need my protection, it will not be bullied by other races. I have nothing to do recently, so I thought about going to the God Realm Star to see the Master and tell the Master about the changes in the Beast. Speaking of this, Chiao paused, but I didn't expect that the Master was not there at that time. Hearing this, Chen Hao also remembered. The Beast is separated from the human side by the Warcraft Mountains. When Xiaobai, as Yinglong, unified the Waf continent, he did not step into the world of the beast because of the Warcraft Mountains. This led to the development of the beast much slower than that of the Yinglong Empire. Chen Hao smiled with relief and said, "Come here." Jiao was startled, her eyes were full of doubt, and she walked towards Chen Hao. Chen Hao reached out and touched Jiao's little head. Jiao felt the warmth from Chen Hao's palm, she was stunned, her eyes were shining. "Master." Chen Hao smiled gently and said, "You have worked hard all these years." Chen Hao stroked her little head, this action was like a person stroking a puppy's head, it was a kind of comfort. However, after hearing what Chen Hao said, Chen Hao noticed that Jiao's body trembled slightly. Chen Hao was slightly startled, he retracted his hand and looked at Jiao. But Jiao's eyes were full of tears. She raised her face and looked at Chen Hao with her tearful eyes, and forced a smile on her face. "Master, Jiao did not disappoint you." Because of Chen Hao's words, Jiao remembered what happened all these years. Although Jiao has invincible strength, the greater the ability, the greater the responsibility, and the greater the responsibility, the more things she needs to think about. Moreover, being invincible does not mean that you can do everything. She has seen the death of her sisters and felt her own powerlessness. In order to complete the task assigned by Chen Hao, she has made countless choices. After each choice, she doesn't know whether it is right or wrong. Sometimes I regret it, sometimes I feel lucky, and sometimes I encounter misunderstandings from my companions. Thinking back to all that, Jiao felt sour and her eyes were covered with tears. Jiao wiped her tears and adjusted her emotions. She looked at Chen Hao, her eyes shining, and said softly, "Master, I can go back to the God Realm Star now, can I go back? I am immortal and I raise a divine beast in another world." Author, Chen Wunian. Chapter 474. Chen Hao gave her almost invincible strength on VAF Star, but being strong does not mean that she can do everything. Just like last time, the Lion Clan could take advantage of Jiao's absence to invade the Silver Fox Clan and kill the Silver Fox Clan's people. Protecting a tribe is not that simple and easy. And it is even more difficult to protect it for such a long time. It's not easy for her either. Chen Hao looked at the expectant glow in Jiao's eyes and smiled, "As long as I am there, it will always be your home. You can go back anytime and anywhere if you want." Hearing this, a smile suddenly broke out on Jiao's face, and her eyes glowed with joy. "Thank you, Master." Jiao was happy. Chen Hao looked at Jiao's happy appearance. He was in a much better mood and felt a little relaxed. Chen Hao glanced at the hot spring pool subconsciously. Taking a closer look, Chen Hao noticed that the hot spring pool was an indoor hot spring pool, which seemed to be artificial hot spring. Chen Hao looked at Jiao. When Jiao heard this, she nodded slightly. "Yes, the Beast Alliance has introduced the technological achievements of the Yinglong Empire, and this artificial hot spring is one of them." Hearing this, Chen Hao touched his chin and said with a smile, "It's quite interesting." He looked at the shirt Jiao was wearing. "Your clothes, too." Jiao hummed, looked at Chen Hao and said with a smile, "Master, does Jiao look good like this?" Chen Hao blinked and nodded slightly, "It looks good." Jiao smiled. Dong dong. Suddenly, there was a knock on the door. Jiao was startled and looked towards the door. "My lady goddess, the Beast King Gao Lin is here." A female voice came from the door. "Hear this, Gao Lin?" Chen Hao looked at Jiao. "I just heard what Jiao said. Isn't the man named Gao Lin the current Beast King of the Beast tribe? He came to see Jiao. What happened?" Jiao said, "Tell him I'm not free." Yes, a voice sounded outside the door, and the voice was respectful. Chen Hao's eyes fell on Jiao and said, "Didn't you say before that Gao Lin is the king of beasts? Why did he come to you? Are you related to him?" Hearing this, Jiao smiled, "Master, you don't know that Gao Lin is indeed the king of beasts, and she is also a member of the Silver Fox tribe. Chen Hao was startled. The Beast King is from the Silver Fox clan. Yes, Jiao nodded slightly. Master, do you still remember the Silver Fox girl who was killed by the Lion tribe before? Gao Lin is the child left by one of the girls. Her father and mother passed away, so I took her with me to raise her. When she grew up, I helped to train her. Later she learned swordsmanship and became a great sword master. After reaching the level of great sword master, she went to the Yinglong Empire to study, and later came back from the Yinglong Empire. After that, she chose to unify the orcs and let them learn the ideas of the Yinglong Empire. I helped her a little bit in it, and that kid has a mind of her own, and she did a great job. Jiao said with a smile. Now, she is also the king of the beast tribe. Hearing this, Chen Hao suddenly realized. Understood. Jiao has invincible strength. With Jiao's ability, it is extremely easy to train a person to become a great swordsman by obtaining magic crystals by hunting monsters. In the orcs, with the strength of the great sword master, who can be the opponent of the great sword master? Naturally, in a world like the beast race that relies on strength to speak, it was easy for Gao Lin to become the king of beasts. In fact, Jiao could also be the beast king, but Jiao didn't have that idea, so she didn't become the beast king. Jiao didn't become the beast king, so naturally the person who could become the beast king was the being cultivated by Jiao. And Gao Lin is naturally the one. Dong dong. Suddenly, a knock on the door interrupted the conversation between Chen Hao and Jiao. Aunt Jiao, it's me. A woman's voice sounded at the door. I want to see you, do you have time? Jiao was startled, her eyes glowing, and she looked at Chen Hao. It's Gao Lin. Jiao frowned. Kid Gao Lin, I told her what's going on, I'm not free. It's okay, master, I asked her to leave. With that said, Jiao looked towards the door and was about to make a sound. Chen Hao raised his hand and stopped Jiao. Jiao was slightly startled and looked at Chen Hao. Chen Hao said with a smile, just in time, I also want to meet this beast king, let her come in. Hearing this, Jiao smiled, okay. She looked towards the door, come in. The door opens. A figure walked in from outside the door. This is a woman with silver ears unique to the Silver Fox tribe on her head and a fluffy silver tail behind her. She was wearing a black uniform with golden patterns on it. There was a coat of arms on the left side of her chest, and the coat of arms looked like a fox. She wore high-heeled leather boots and carried a long sword at her waist. She wore a single ponytail, and under her bangs was a delicate face, but there was no smile on her face, only seriousness. The whole person looks full of majesty and heroic appearance. This guy gave Chen Hao the feeling of a regular soldier, majestic and unsmiling. This is Gao Lin, now the king of the beast tribe. After seeing this guy's demeanor, Chen Hao was determined. This guy's temperament really fits his definition of the word king. When Gao Lin saw Chen Hao, her eyes flashed with luster, her brows furrowed slightly, and her eyes fell on Jiao. She said, Aunt Jiao, who is this? Chen Hao could judge from Gao Lin's demeanor that Gao Lin did not recognize his identity and that Gao Lin was wary of him. She seemed to have some hostility towards her, but because Jiao was there, Gao Lin did not show her hostility. When Jiao heard this, she said with a smile on her face, this is my master. Gao Lin was startled, then she said, Master? You mean, he is the master you have been telling me about? Gao Lin frowned. She looked at Chen Hao. Suddenly, her pupils shrank suddenly. She seemed to realize something. Her pupils condensed. She quickly knelt down on one knee in front of Chen Hao and put her hand on her chest. Silver Fox Girl Gao Lin pays homage to the Creator God. Was recognized. Chen Hao touched his nose, raised his hand, and there was a chair behind him. He sat on the chair and looked at Gao Lin. You seemed to be hostile to me just now. Gao Lin was stunned, and she quickly explained, yes, I think the god of creation knows everything, and Gao Lin doesn't hide it. Gao Lin doesn't like the opposite sex very much, so. But if it were Lord Chuangshi God, it would be different. The reason why Gao Lin is today is thanks to Lord Chuangshi God. Without Lord Chuangshi God, Gao Lin would not be where he is today. I am immortal and I raise a divine beast in another world. Author, Chen Wunian. Chapter 475. Hate the opposite sex? No wonder he could sense her hostility the first time she saw him. Chen Hao smiled, get up. Hearing this, Gao Lin slowly stood up. She lowered her head slightly, looking down, not daring to look at Chen Hao. Her expression was full of awe. Chen Hao said, how did you know my identity as the god of creation? Did Jiao tell you my identity? Gao Lin heard this and said, no, Aunt Jiao calls you the master, she didn't mention your identity as the god of creation to me. The reason why I know your identity is because I have been to the Yinglong Empire, there are many statues of you there. Hearing this, Chen Hao suddenly realized and nodded slightly. Chen Hao looked at Gao Lin, what's the matter with you coming to see your Aunt Jiao this time? Gao Lin heard this and looked at Jiao standing next to Chen Hao. She looked at Chen Hao again and explained, I have been paying attention to Aunt Jiao. I heard from my subordinates that there was a stranger coming to Aunt Jiao, so I wanted to come and meet that stranger. I just didn't expect it to be you. Chen Hao frowned and stared at Gao Lin, are you monitoring Jiao? Gao Lin was stunned. She quickly knelt on one knee in front of Chen Hao and lowered her head, I did ask someone to pay attention to Aunt Jiao, but I did it out of good intentions. Good intentions? Chen Hao stared at Gao Lin, really? Gao Lin's face changed drastically. She knelt on both knees and supported the ground with her hands. She kowtowed to Chen Hao and her face turned pale, Lord Creator God, I was wrong. I shouldn't have deceived Lord Creator God. Jiao, who was standing aside, saw this and suddenly became extremely nervous. She looked at Chen Hao, Master. Her voice was trembling and uneasy. Chen Hao knew what Jiao was nervous about. In Jiao's eyes, although Gao Lin in front of her is not her daughter, Jiao has brought Gao Lin up since she was a child, and in her eyes, Gao Lin is basically equivalent to her daughter. Now seeing her daughter being frightened by Chen Hao, Jiao is a little nervous, fearing that Gao Lin will get into trouble, but she dare not offend Chen Hao. So, she can only call Chen Hao carefully. Chen Hao glanced at Jiao, and his eyes fell on Gao Lin. Information processor, I want to know why Gao Lin sent someone to monitor Jiao, Chen Hao said to the information processor in his heart. Although Chen Hao has some guesses, Chen Hao needs to confirm. And the information processor can just tell Chen Hao the reason. The information processor can invade other people's information databases, so the information processor can naturally invade Gao Lin's information database and obtain Gao Lin's thoughts and intentions. Received instructions, obtaining information. Information acquisition completed, do you want to transfer it to your information database? Transfer. For a while, Chen Hao's memory has something more. These are Gao Lin's memories. And these memories slowly relaxed Chen Hao's frown. He looked at Gao Lin and said calmly, the reason why you sent people to monitor Jiao is because Jiao is uncontrollable. You are now the leader of the Beast King Alliance and have supreme power in the Beast tribe, but this power also has an instability, that is Jiao. It's just that Gao Lin knows Jiao's character and knows that she is not interested in power, but you are not at ease, so you sent people to monitor Jiao, right? Jiao was startled, her eyes trembled slightly, looking at Gao Lin kneeling on the ground, she was a little confused for a while, Gao Lin. Gao Lin's face was as pale as paper, she frowned, said nothing, and seemed a little ashamed. Chen Hao said, however, it's really interesting. You seem to be a little conflicted. If you consider the Beast tribe, then you must stabilize the entire Beast King Alliance, and you think Xiao's personality is not suitable for being a beast king, so if Xiao has a desire for power, you must find a way to dispel Xiao's desire. But you also think that if Xiao has the ambition to become a beast king, you are willing to give up the beast king alliance to Xiao and let Xiao be the beast king. These two ideas are tug of war in your mind, but in the end you can't make up your mind which one to choose. Chen Hao smiled. It's okay, I thought you had completely lost your eyes to power and even ignored family affection. Now it seems that it's not what I thought. Xiao's pale face slowly turned a little red after hearing what Chen Hao said. She looked at Gao Lin, who was kneeling on the ground, and then looked at Chen Hao. Looking at the smile on Chen Hao's face, Xiao realized that her master's mood had improved, and he breathed a sigh of relief. Chen Hao looked at Gao Lin and said with a smile, "Get up." Gao Lin was stunned. She lowered her head, and said, "Gao Lin dare not get up, Gao Lin is guilty." Hearing this, Chen Hao smiled, "You are indeed guilty, but the crime is not punishable by death. You monitored Xiao for the sake of justice, and you did not think of harming Xiao, and even thought of giving the Beast King alliance to Xiao, which shows that Xiao is still important in your eyes. What you think is right. Only a true leader will worry so much. Even the smallest and impossible details will be considered. Next, you just rest assured, I can assure you that Xiao will not participate in the power struggle of the Beast tribe. You can dispel your concerns." Gao Lin was stunned. She raised her face and looked at Chen Hao. "Lord Creator, what do you mean by this?" Chen Hao smiled and said, "Xiao will live with me in the God realm, she will no longer live in the Beast tribe, so you don't have to worry about these." Gao Lin was stunned, and she couldn't help but look at Xiao, "Aunt Xiao. Xiao is not stupid." After listening to what Chen Hao said, she looked at Gao Lin's reaction and realized everything. Xiao smiled, "I always thought you were just a child. From now on, you have grown up. I think it's time for me to let go and let you grow up. Aunt Xiao." Gao Lin didn't know what to say for a moment, and her eyes were filled with tears. Xiao walked to Gao Lin, slowly squatted down, and hugged Gao Lin. She said softly, "Actually, Aunt Xiao knows everything you did." Gao Lin was stunned. Xiao smiled and said, "I also know that you have your concerns, and sometimes you can't help yourself. After I leave, you have to work hard and continue to observe your beliefs, so that the Beast tribe will become strong and prosperous, and everyone in the Beast tribe can live a safe and prosperous life." Speaking, Xiao let go of Gao Lin and slowly stood up. She looked at Chen Hao. "Master, Xiao is ready to leave." Chen Hao nodded slightly. Chen Hao stood up, raised his hand, and opened a warp engine channel. Chen Hao and Xiao disappeared into the warp engine channel. Gao Lin stared blankly at the closed black hole, her eyes trembling slightly. "Aunt Xiao. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. I am immortal and I raise a divine beast in another world." Author, Chen Wunian. Chapter 476. Gao Lin knelt on the ground, staring at the place where Xiao and Chen Hao left, in a daze. A full 2 hours later, Gao Lin slowly stood up, raised his hand, put it in front of his chest, and saluted to the place where Xiao and Chen Hao left. "Aunt Xiao, I don't know if Gao Lin did the right thing, but Gao Lin must do this, for the future of the Beast clan and the justice of the Beast clan. If Gao Lin did anything wrong, in the future Gao Lin will definitely apologize to you in front of you." She turned and left. At the same time, Chen Hao brought Xiao to the portal. "Lord Chuangshen," a voice came from the side. It was Nora and Suna's voice. Chen Hao glanced at them, nodded slightly, and then looked at Xiao. Xiao looked around, and her eyes fell on Chen Hao again. "Master." Chen Hao said, "You know all the things Gao Lin did." Chiao was startled for a moment, then nodded slightly. Well. She showed a smile. Yes, I know that she has people watching me secretly. I feel that her perspective and thinking are different, so she makes different decisions. If you think about the problem from her perspective, she does that, there's nothing wrong with that. And she really didn't want to harm me. She was just doing it for the future of the orcs. That child takes the future of the orcs very seriously. While speaking, Chiao lowered his head slightly, as if he was deep in thought. Seeing this, Chen Hao understood. Chiao regards Gao Lin as her own child, and she can forgive her child's actions as long as they are not too excessive. But, she has grown up, and I think it's time for me to leave and let her grow up freely. When Chiao said this, she looked at Chen Hao and said with a smile, Master, I will live in the God realm from now on. Bar. Hearing this, Chen Hao smiled. Well, this portal is the portal to the God realm star. By the way, I have been to the God realm star before, and I must have used this portal. Chiao nodded slightly. Yes. Then you go back by yourself first. Chen Hao crossed his arms and said, I plan to spend a few days here in VAF continent. Chiao was startled, and she looked at Chen Hao. Master, can Chiao accompany you? Chen Hao smiled. No, I plan to look around alone. If I need you for anything, I will call you. Hearing this, Chiao nodded slightly. Okay then, Master, I will return to the God realm first. Chen Hao responded, and then watched Chiao enter the portal and disappear before his eyes. Chen Hao said, Information processor, help me contact Xiadi. Instruction received, connection is being established. The connection was established successfully and you are ready to make calls. Listen to the mechanical sound coming from the information processor. Chen Hao crossed his arms and said, Xiadi, can you hear me? Master? I can hear it. What are your orders, Master? Xiadi's voice was surprised at first, and then she became respectful after realizing it was Chen Hao. Chen Hao said, Chiao is going back to the God Realm planet. She has rarely stayed in the God Realm planet before and doesn't know much about the God Realm planet. You can help her prepare a place to live, and have all kinds of life and so on. Yes, Xiadi's voice came, showing respect. Chen Hao hummed, let's do this for now. Information processor, disconnect. Dismissed. For Chiao, the God Realm star is a strange place for her, and she still needs someone to take care of her. Xiadi's gentle personality is just right. Next, the question is, where should I go? Chen Hao walked to the balcony, minding his own business, and stood on the balcony, with the wind blowing in his face. He looked at the scenery ahead. Come into view. Chen Hao's pupils dilated. This is. In front of Chen Hao, he could see cars driving on the street, and even traffic lights could be seen at street intersections. People coming and going are wearing extremely modern clothes, and you can even see shirts, skirts and the like. Seeing this, Chen Hao couldn't help but blinked. The city in front of me seems to have become a 20th century metropolis. The change is a bit big, Chen Hao muttered. Because Dalong spreads various scientific knowledge on the Valve continent, people throughout the Valve continent began to study technology. In this way, mechanical vehicles will naturally appear, and faster vehicles will naturally replace the slower beast-controlling mounts. Looking at this situation, it is certain that science has a huge impact on magic. Just like what the god of magic said, the age of magic has passed. Suddenly, Chen Hao thought of someone. Sword God. The world has changed so much now, what about the sword god? What is he doing now? Thinking of this, Chen Hao looked at Nora and Su-Na beside him. Where does the sword god live now? When Nora heard this, she explained, the sword god is here in Yinglong City, but the sword god now is different from before. It's different? What's different? Nora explained, the sword god is the master of the sword temple. In the past, many people were eager to learn swordsmanship and become strong. But it is different now. Many people have begun to study technology and specialize in various subjects such as physics and chemistry. I think there are far fewer people learning swordsmanship. The sword temple has declined. Now the sword god stays in his own sword god manor every day, staying behind closed doors every day. The sword god temple has also been disbanded. Hearing this, Chen Hao was stunned. Chen Hao still remembered that when he first came to VAF continent, the sword temple and the Dharma temple were two huge forces in VAF continent. Such forces were not even controllable by the empire at that time. And now, the sword temple is completely gone? Chen Hao thought for a moment and said, "Take me to Sword God. I want to visit that old friend." Noila nodded slightly, "Yes." Nora and Suena left the Creation Temple with Chen Hao. Nora came to the door and called out a familiar unicorn car. It seemed that Nora and the others deliberately did not replace their beast riding cars with cars on the street in order to give Chen Hao a sense of familiarity. Soon, Chen Hao came outside the Sword God Manor. Chen Hao looked at the Sword God Manor in front of him through the curtains of the unicorn car. This. Chen Hao frowned. Isn't this the manor of the god of law? He looked at Nora and Suna suspiciously. Nora nodded slightly. After the death of Fa Shen's family declined. The descendants sold the manor, and the sword god bought it at a very high price. Hearing this, Chen Hao knew what was going on. The sword god and the Dharma god didn't fight each other, but it was obvious that the sword god had already regarded the Dharma god as his confidant. The unicorn car slowly stopped in front of the gate. The door has been opened, and an old man is standing at the door. Chen Hao saw the old man through the window, and his eyes lit up slightly. A smile suddenly appeared on his face. The old man also saw Chen Hao, and he also smiled. Master Chuangshen came to the humble residence, and it was a long way to welcome him. His voice sounded, still as strong as ever. I am immortal and I raise a divine beast in another world. Author, Chen Wunian. Chapter 477. Chen Hao got off the unicorn car. He looked at the old man in front of him. The old man was wearing white clothes and had a goatee. Wrinkles could be seen on his face, but his eyes were bright and he looked cheerful. It's just, the old man is still a little different from before. The sword he had always kept with him was gone. Chen Hao said with a smile, the old gentleman seems to be in good spirits, so I feel relieved. When the sword god heard this, he laughed. It is an honor for me, old man, to be able to care about Lord Chuangshen. Lord Chuangshen, please come in. Hearing this, Chen Hao smiled and followed the sword god inside. Entering the gate, there is a long walkway. Chen Hao looked ahead. There was a familiar building directly in front of him. That was the main house of the manor, and it was also where the Dharma god lived. The era of chaos has passed. Ever since Yinglong unified VAF continent and established the Yinglong Empire, the world has ushered in an era of peace. The sword god put his hands behind his back and raised his head to look at the blue sky above. Once upon a time, the old man and I, the god of law, were longing for the arrival of the peaceful era, but we never expected that when the peaceful era truly arrived, the old man and I would be the first to be abandoned by the times. Speaking of this, the sword god couldn't help but smile bitterly. Hearing this, Chen Hao looked at the sword god and said, "Why do you say that?" The sword god looked at Chen Hao, then he looked away and sighed, "Hey. The god of swords, the god of Dharma, the old man and I are praised as gods by people because in the chaotic era, strength is respected, and the stronger you are, the more you will be worshipped. But now there are laws and regulations in the Yinglong Empire that do not allow private fight, otherwise you will face severe punishment." The sword god crossed his chest with his hands. He was wearing short sleeves. When his arms were wrapped together, the tanned muscles on his arms were particularly noticeable. The sword god raised his head and looked at the construction ahead. This law has made the entire Valve continent peaceful, but at the same time, it has also made swordsmen lose their usefulness. Swordsmen who can't fight, haha. In this peaceful era, things that can serve the public and bring happiness to the public are more favored. Having said this, the sword god paused, looked at Chen Hao, and said with a smile, in the past, the beast masters used their beasts for fighting, but now the beast masters use their beasts for competition. Who is more beautiful? Those big-eared hamsters are particularly popular now. Chen Hao's smile froze. He touched the back of his head. What a big change. Yes, the sword god said, so, after it was abandoned, those who still want to learn swordsmanship are those who love swordsmanship. But most of them go to study science and the like. Tisk, but I have to say, science is indeed a good thing. As he spoke, the sword god led Chen Hao into the room. When Chen Hao followed the sword god into the room and came to the hall, he was shocked by the hall in front of him. Fluorescent stones were hung on the roof of the hall, and the fluorescent stones illuminated the entire hall like lights. The hall presents a magnificent appearance. In this hall, there are leather sofas, glass tables, and directly opposite, a huge LCD screen. A TV series is playing on the LCD screen. Chen Hao was stunned. Chen Hao even felt that he had returned to the earth for a moment in this room in the hall. The sword god sat down on the sofa, picked up the remote control on the table, and pressed it. The LCD screen flickered slightly and turned off. Chen Hao came back to his senses and looked at the sword god. The sword god smiled and said, "Sit down." Okay. Chen Hao sat down on the sofa. After sitting down, Chen Hao couldn't help but look at the LCD screen. The technology of VAF continent has reached this level. Can it already develop satellite TV? This was something Chen Hao didn't expect. It's unbelievable. If things continue as they are now, it won't take more than a few decades for online games to appear. Interesting. It seems that the science Dalong spread at the beginning was still right. These TV series and so on can provide people with entertainment. The old man has nothing to do now. Apart from practicing his sword skills, he just watches these things to pass the time. The voice of the sword god came. Chen Hao withdrew his gaze and looked at the sword god. The sword god met Chen Hao's gaze and said with a smile, "In terms of entertainment, fighting spirit and magic are not as good as these things." Hearing this, Chen Hao nodded silently. He calmed down a little and adjusted his mood. He looked at the sword god and said, "I haven't been to VAF continent for a long time. The changes here have indeed been great. The science here has made great progress." The sword god nodded slightly. "Although I have been abandoned by the times, this era is a good era. It's a pity that old guy couldn't see this era. He chose a stupid path." As he said this, the smile on his face disappeared after the sword god mentioned the old guy. When Chen Hao heard this, he stopped talking. The sword god said, "Many of the things developed by science and technology research institutes are driven by magic. The old guy knows these things best. If he is still here, with his understanding of magic, I can be sure that he can. In this era, there is a magical turmoil, but it is a pity." "What a pity, that damn old guy," sword god said, clenching his fists. When Chen Hao heard this, he fell silent. The atmosphere in the hall became a little heavy. About 20 seconds had passed. Although it was only 20 seconds, it felt like a long time had passed. Chen Hao said, "I saw him before he left. He said he was tired." Ah, sword god sighed. He raised his head and looked at the ceiling above. "Stupid, really stupid." Chen Hao looked at sword god immersed in his own world and muttered to himself. He said, "The god of law has left. I feel good to see that you are strong and energetic. I don't know many people in the WAF continent. The god of law and you are two of the few." Sword god was startled. He came back to his senses and looked at Chen Hao. He smiled and said, "Don't worry, My old bones will live for a while. Next time, the god of creation wants to find someone familiar to chat, you can find me. Hearing this, Chen Hao smiled. Okay. Chen Hao stayed in the sword god's residence, chatting with the sword god and watching TV series at the same time. Nora and Suna stood aside and watched the two of them. They did not disturb them, but just stood and watched. Time passed, and it was night. Chen Hao did not have the habit of staying overnight at other people's homes. He said goodbye to the sword god and went back to the creation temple. In name, the creation temple was Chen Hao's residence in the mortal world. Chen Hao had his own room. Chen Hao lay on the bed, looking at the unfamiliar ceiling above. He thought about what his sword god had said to him. Stupid, is the god of law stupid? Chen Hao slowly closed his eyes. He did not know, and he had no answer to this question. Chen Hao did not think about it. Tomorrow he would go to the big wolf to see what the big wolf's brat was doing in the Warcraft forest recently. I am immortal and I raise a divine beast in another world. Author, Chen Wunian. Chapter 478. The next day, Chen Hao didn't say anything to Nora and Suna after getting up. He used the information processor to teleport directly into the Warcraft forest. This location is where Chen Hao lived in the Warcraft forest before, and it is also where the bodies of Big Wolf, Second Wolf, and Third Wolf's mother are buried. When Chen Hao came to this location, he saw the tombstone set by Big Wolf for his mother. Chen Hao looked at the tombstone in front of him. He looked away and looked around. The world of Warcraft Forest is still the same as before, not much has changed. Woof, suddenly, a voice came. Chen Hao was startled when he heard the sound and looked towards the source of the sound. I saw a furry and round little guy standing not far away looking at me. This little guy looks like a newborn puppy. It has light blue hair all over its body and a blue tail behind it. At this moment, its tail is wagging particularly cheerfully. It had a pair of blue eyes. It stared at Chen Hao and stuck out its tongue. Chen Hao looked at the little guy with a smile on his face. An information bar appeared on the side, and the information about the puppy appeared on the information bar. Pup stage wind wolf cub. This little guy is said to be a wolf cub, but he looks like a dog cub. Chen Hao squatted down and waved to it. When the puppy saw Chen Hao waving, his eyes lit up and he started running. The four chubby little feet ran extremely happily, quickly running towards Chen Hao. When Chen Hao saw it, he smiled and stretched out his hand. When it ran to him, he reached out and picked it up. Into arms. The little guy was held in Chen Hao's arms. He raised his head and looked at Chen Hao, then raised his little head and started licking. No, 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 Chen Hao hurriedly raised his chin, fearing that this guy would drool all over his face. Master, suddenly, a voice came. Chen Hao came back to his senses and looked at the source of the sound. There was a werewolf standing over there, it was the big wolf. Big Wolf looked at Chen Hao, his golden pupils filled with joy. Master. Chen Hao smiled. Big Wolf, long time no see. Woof, suddenly, Chen Hao heard the little guy in his arms cry out. Chen Hao looked at the little guy in his arms and saw that the little guy was looking at the big wolf, its tail wagging behind it. Chen Hao looked at the little guy. Is this your child? When the big wolf heard this, he raised his hand, touched the back of his head, and smiled naively. According to human terms, he is my 27th generation grandson. Chen Hao was startled, then he smiled. I have given birth to a lot of children. Are they all your children in Warcraft Forest now? While saying this, Chen Hao put the little guy down. The big wolf smiled naively. Master, there is nothing we can do. Children all like to have children. Hearing this, Chen Hao nodded slightly. How do you feel about living in this Warcraft forest during this period? Do you have any other ideas? He looked at the big wolf with a smile. Do you want to return to the god realm? De Lang was startled. he looked at Chen Hao, and then nodded heavily, I want to go back. Chen Hao smiled, why? Why do you suddenly want to go back? The big wolf smiled, because I have fulfilled my wish. My wish is to return to the Warcraft forest to marry a wife and have children. This may be my mother's wish. I think my mother will be very happy if she knows this. Now, the entire Warcraft forest is full of my descendants, and they live happily in the Warcraft forest. Besides, Big Wolf rubbed the back of his head naively, I miss my master. More than just suddenly, a voice came. Hearing the sound, Chen Hao came back to his senses and looked at the source of the sound. I saw a silver girl walking out from the side. As soon as the little wind wolf saw the silver lady, it trotted over to the little wind wolf. When the silver girl saw it, she squatted down and picked up Xiao Feng Lang. She looked at Chen Hao and said with a smile, Master. This silver lady is none other than the big wolf's wife, Carol. Carol laughed and said, since the big wolf left the god realm, he misses his master every night. Even when he sleeps, he murmurs for his master. It was fine at first, but he only dreamed about his master for a month or two. You once or twice. Later, it dreamed about it almost every day and talked about its master every day. Hearing this, Chen Hao was stunned and looked at Big Wolf. The big wolf put his hand under his head, and lowered his head with an embarrassed look on his face, almost burying his head in the cracks of the ground. Chen Hao looked at Big Wolf. He smiled. Chen Hao understood. Understood. All along, Chen Hao realized one thing. The royal beasts are divided into male and female. As the beasts grow up, the male beasts will gradually have their own ideas and things they want to do, so most male beasts will do their own things. What they do is to be independent, conquer females, reproduce offspring, etc. Similar to the big dragon, big bear, big wolf, and three wolves. This is caused by their nature, which is engraved in their genes and cannot be changed. Female tamers do not have as strong a nature as male tamers, or it can be said that they are more likely to rely on their masters and do not have such a strong desire to be independent. Therefore, many female beasts will choose to stay with Chen Hao and rely on Chen Hao when they grow up. Similar to Xiaoying, Xiaodi, and Firefox. The big wolf has grown up, so he naturally wants to be independent, conquer females, and reproduce. At the same time, because he wants to be independent and prove that he has grown up, he doesn't want to rely on Chen Hao anymore. But in fact, no matter how big the big wolf grows up, no matter how much his nature drives him to be independent, he is still a big wolf. He was raised by Chen Hao since he was a child, and his dependence on Chen Hao and his feelings for Chen Hao have never changed. Even if his wildness makes him stay away from Chen Hao in action, his feelings will still make him miss his master after he relaxes. Chen Hao figured out these things, and he smiled, the God realm will always be your home, and I will always be your master. The big wolf was startled, and he looked at Chen Hao. Chen Hao smiled and said, don't think that you are abandoning your master by leaving him. Similarly, you are not abandoned by your master. In the eyes of your master, you are just playing outside. You can play as long as you want. If you miss home and your master, you can go home at any time. The big wolf's eyes trembled slightly, and his eyes were moist all of a sudden. Master. Big wolf's voice trembled. Chen Hao smiled, okay, we have children and we are all adults, so don't cry. Big wolf raised his furry hands, wiped his tears, then smiled and said, okay. Thank you, master. Chen Hao smiled. He looked around. There was a warp engine portal next to Chen Hao. Chen Hao looked at Big Wolf, this door is the portal to the God realm. I set the rules. Only you and your blood-related life can enter this portal. Others cannot use this portal. In the future, you can go to the God realm at any time through this portal. Okay, Great Big Wolf nodded repeatedly. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. I am immortal and I raise a divine beast in another world. Author, Chen Wunian. Chapter 479. Chen Hao looked at the joy on the faces of the two little guys, Big Wolf and Carol. He was also in a good mood and smiled. Master, it's almost noon now. Carol and I have prepared lunch. I plan to have lunch and make some more preparations before returning to the God realm. At this point, Big Wolf smiled and said, Master, do you want to eat together? Hearing this, Chen Hao smiled and said, No, I just came to see you. Seeing that you are living happily, I feel relieved. Big Wolf touched the back of his head, he looked at Chen Hao, and then at Carol. Big Wolf still looked silly. He was not good at talking and couldn't find any topics, so he wanted to see if Carol could find some topics. Carol noticed the Big Wolf's gaze, she looked at Chen Hao and said with a smile, Then what are the plans for the master next? The Big Wolf was startled, he looked at Chen Hao and said with a smile, Yes, master, you are here next, do you have anything else to do? Chen Hao looked at the Big Wolf's silly behavior of agreeing, he smiled, Nothing, I just plan to walk around and see the changes in this world. Hearing this, the Big Wolf looked at Carol again. Chen Hao subconsciously touched his nose. The Big Wolf was so silly that he didn't even want to use his brain. Did he just leave it to Carol? Carol smiled and said, This kind of thing is not so urgent. Master, you can also stay and have lunch before leaving. These foods are made by me and the Big Wolf. We learn the cooking methods of humans, and the things we make are not bad. Yes, 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 the Big Wolf nodded repeatedly, he looked at Chen Hao and said with a smile, Master, there is no hurry, you can talk about it after lunch, there is no hurry. Hearing this, Chen Hao thought about it for a while. This matter is indeed not urgent. Chen Hao nodded slightly, Okay. Okay, Big Wolf grinned happily, with a smile on his face, Master, follow me. As he said that, Big Wolf walked in front happily. Chen Hao looked at Big Wolf's back and smiled. This guy doesn't seem to have changed much. If it weren't for the fact that he had grown up and his nature drove him to be unable to do what he did when he was a child, he would probably turn into a wolf and carry Chen Hao home. Chen Hao didn't think much about it and followed Big Wolf and Carol forward. Crossing a road paved with bluestone and passing through the forest. Chen Hao's eyes suddenly opened up. There was a wooden house in front of him. This wooden house was a two-story wooden house and it was very large. In front of the wooden house, there were two plots of land, where various crops were planted. At this moment, the crops were full of fruits. These fruits were fruits that Chen Hao didn't recognize. Chen Hao followed Big Wolf and the others and walked towards the wooden house along the road in the middle of the field. Chen Hao looked at the crops in the fields on both sides, and there was a hint of novelty in his eyes. These are all planted by the Big Wolf, Carol said. Chen Hao looked at Carol. Carol smiled and said, 10 years ago, as the number of children increased, the food in the forest gradually became insufficient. Later, we took the monsters to the human side and exchanged food with humans. Later, we felt that it was not a good idea to do that, so we thought about growing food ourselves. Carol said, sweeping over the crops, these crops were taught to us by a human named Duna. We just learned at first, and then we slowly mastered this planting method. Duna, Chen Hao remembered that he was the guy who was blessed by the Lord God of the Big Wolf when he met in the arena before. Is that guy still alive? And, there is a question. Chen Hao crossed his arms. Thinking of this, Chen Hao subconsciously glanced at the wind wolf cub in Carol's arms, which looked more like a dog than a wolf. When the little wind wolf saw Chen Hao looking at him, it excitedly barked. The sapphire-like eyes blinked at Chen Hao, and the tail behind him was wagging particularly happily. Hearing this woof, Chen Hao was sure. As the wind wolves began to eat grains, vegetables, and fruits, their appearance began to evolve, gradually transitioning from the form of wolves to the form of dogs. Speaking of which, there is no such creature as dog in this world. Now, Chen Hao looked at the little wind wolf and estimated that after a while of evolution, dogs will really appear. While Chen Hao was thinking, the 3 people and 1 wolf had already entered the wooden house. There was a large dining table in the middle of the wooden house. "Master, sit down." The big wolf pulled down a chair and looked at Chen Hao. Chen Hao nodded slightly. He walked to the dining table and sat down. "I'll go serve the dishes," the big wolf said with a smile. "I'll go too." Carol put the little wind wolf down, and she followed him into the inner room. After the little wind wolf got off the ground, it happily ran to Chen Hao's calf, wagging its tail and rubbing Chen Hao's feet. Chen Hao looked at the little wind wolf's behavior and couldn't help but smile. The last time Chen Hao came, the one who was so friendly to him was the child of the big wolf and Carol. It seems that as long as the wind wolves are related to the big wolf, they are naturally fond of Chen Hao. Not long after, the big wolf and Carol brought out the food. When Chen Hao looked at the table full of food, he was a little confused. There were all kinds of rice, vegetables, and barbecue. Chen Hao picked up the chopsticks and tried it. It was very fragrant. Compared with the dishes made by the Snow Girl, the dishes made by Carol and the big wolf are more rough, but roughness also has its advantages. "Master, how is it?" The big wolf stared at Chen Hao, its tail wagging slowly, its eyes full of anticipation. "How does this roasted porcupine taste?" Chen Hao smiled. "Not bad, very fragrant." The big wolf smiled, and its tail wagging behind it was particularly happy. Looking very happy. Carol looked at the big wolf's appearance. She couldn't help but chuckle, and noticed Chen Hao looking at her. She smiled and explained, "Master, this dish is the big wolf's specialty, his most proud masterpiece. He is so happy to be praised by you, the master. Look at how happy his tail is wagging." The big wolf was startled. He immediately scratched his face silly, and smiled awkwardly. Chen Hao smiled. "I haven't eaten this kind of food for a long time, and it feels pretty good." "But..." Chen Hao looked at Big Wolf and Carol. "I remember that Wind Wolf should only eat meat. You eat grains, vegetables, and fruits, which will have an impact on your body, right?" Big Wolf smiled and said, "It was a little uncomfortable at first, but it was fine later. In fact, Carol and I are already at the main god level. We can go without food and drink, but the children can't. In order to raise the children, we have gradually developed the habit of eating. Grains and fruits can also be eaten by wild wind wolves, but they are not easy to digest. In the wild, wind wolves will not eat these things unless they are very hungry. However, the children have our divine power in their bodies, so they can also digest these things, but they will not be used to it at first, but they will get used to it slowly. There are too many children. If they all eat meat, the meat of the monsters in the monster forest will not be enough." "No way." Big Wolf smiled and said, "We can only adapt. I am immortal and I raise a divine beast in another world." Author, Chen Wunian. Chapter 480. Hearing this, Chen Hao smiled and looked at Big Wolf. "As the main god, you can use your divine power to create creatures, and you can also get meat. Why not use this method?" The big wolf was stunned, and he and Carol looked at each other. Carol smiled and said, "Master wants to know what you think, just tell me what you think." The big wolf was stunned. He looked at Chen Hao. "Even the creatures created with my ability are still living things. Those creatures I created will also be equivalent to my children. Use the flesh and blood of my children to raise other creatures' son. I don't think this is okay, and I don't think the master would like to see me do this. And if I really do that, my children won't be able to learn to get food on their own. One day, when I leave, they won't be able to live on their own. So, I chose to use the current method to let the children adapt slowly. Having said this, De Lang touched the back of his head. He looked at Chen Hao and said with an embarrassed smile, De Lang is also raising a child for the first time. What I am thinking about is actually borrowed from your ideas, Master. Chen Hao was startled. He smiled, well, indeed, if it were me, I would do the same. It seems that you have learned a lot by staying with me. This is what Chen Hao didn't expect. This honest little guy who stayed by his side before actually learned how to handle things on his own. Pretty good. In Chen Hao's view, using one's own energy to create living creatures to cultivate other living creatures is almost equivalent to using one's own meat to feed children. Although it was nothing to the Lord God, this move alone was hard for Chen Hao to accept. Chen Hao didn't say any more and started eating. Big Wolf and Carol said that they wanted to return to the God realm, but now they have lived in the World of Warcraft forest for a long time and have roots here. To leave, they need to make some preparations, such as, talk about this with your children. Leave only when you are ready. After Chen Hao finished his lunch, he said goodbye to them first, and then he left. Before, Chen Hao wanted to walk around, but he didn't know where to go. And now Chen Hao knows where to go. Wolong Island. After visiting the big wolf, he wanted to see the big dragon and the second dragon. It's been a long time since I last saw those two little guys. Dalong went to VAF continent some time ago to spread the truth. That guy should have returned to Wolong Island by now. I don't know what those two guys, Dalong and Erlong, have done in the recent period. Chen Hao passed through the warp engine passage and came to Wolong Island. At this moment, Chen Hao's location is located in the giant tree forest, which is the location of Chen Hao's previous residence on Wolong Island. As soon as he arrived at this location, Chen Hao smelled the scent of grass and flowers. At the same time, he could also smell the decaying smell of dead trees. Various flavors mix together to form a faint smell, which is the smell of life. Chen Hao raised his head and looked at the forest of giant trees in front of him. There are huge trees everywhere here, which is amazing. Suddenly, Chen Hao's eyes were attracted by something. Looking at the gadget, Chen Hao couldn't help but blinked. In front of Chen Hao, there was a giant statue. This statue was 60 meters high and very huge. And the appearance of this statue is also very familiar. It was exactly what Chen Hao looked like. Seeing this statue, Chen Hao couldn't help but blink his eyes, and the corners of his mouth twitched. When you see your own statue on Wolong Island, you don't have to think about it at all. This statue must have been erected by that boy Dalong. It's really yours. Chen Hao touched his chin. Master, suddenly, a voice sounded behind Chen Hao. The voice was full of surprise and loud at the same time. It was so big that it scared Chen Hao, and he quickly looked behind him. Upon entering, I saw a handsome man with dragon horns standing there. His face was full of smiles, and his ice crystal eyes were full of joy. He adjusted his emotions a little, raised his hand, put it on his chest, lowered his head and bent slightly. Master, Dalong was so excited when he knew that Master was coming. He accidentally scared the Master. Dalong is really damn it. Chen Hao was startled and stretched his eyebrows. This guy really scared Chen Hao. Although Chen Hao's body has become immortal, his body functions are actually those of ordinary people. This big dragon suddenly screamed directly behind him, which was really scary. After making a big mistake, Chen Hao coughed and smiled. Master, suddenly, another voice sounded. Chen Hao was just about to speak, but when he heard this voice, he could only temporarily take back his words. He raised his head and saw a beautiful figure flying towards the side, flapping its flesh wings. It was Erlong. Erlong also has joy in his eyes and a smile on his face. She retracted her wings and landed next to Dalong. Like Dalong, she raised her hand and put it in front of her chest. She lowered her head slightly and saluted Chen Hao. Two dragons pay their respects to the master. Seeing this, Chen Hao smiled. I haven't seen you two for a long time. I heard that Dalong, you went to VAF continent to spread the truth some time ago. Dalong's eyes lit up. He looked at Chen Hao and nodded slightly. Yes, that's actually the case. After Erlong and I returned to Wolong Island, we unified Wolong Island and made all the giant dragons recognize me as the dragon god. Then, Erlong and I had many dragon babies. Then the dragon babies grew up, became independent, and began to find partners and have children. Life was still novel at first, but it was a bit boring later. At the same time, I missed my master. I always feel that leaving the master is not what a beast master should do at this point. Dalong looked a little depressed, and he looked at Chen Hao. Master, now that I think about it, I still don't know whether the original choice was right or not. Hearing this, Chen Hao smiled. Of course it's right. The reason why you and Erlong came to Wolong Island was because you listened to me. You should not have forgotten that I asked you to do what you want to do. And you came to Wolong Island with my consent. Whether it was the departure of Little Skeleton, Sword Demon, or the departure of Big Wolf, Big Bear and Big Dragon, in addition to their own nature, there was another one, that is, Chen Hao's order. Chen Hao said from the beginning that he would let the beast masters choose what they want to do and then do what they want to do. It is because of Chen Hao's order and their nature that they will do these things. Otherwise, they will never leave Chen Hao out of their absolute loyalty to him. And the current situation is what Chen Hao wants to see. Chen Hao just wants to see these beast masters grow and develop on their own. Dalong was startled and said, but... There is no but. Chen Hao smiled and said, you just completed the task I assigned. Since I asked you to do it, just do it. Dalong's eyes lit up and he smiled, yes. Chen Hao slowly raised his hands, crossed his chest, looked at Dalong and smiled, go on, why did you go to the WAF continent to spread the truth?